Hello, my name is Marian Dalk. I'm the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education State Program Assistant and Small Farm Outreach Program with Virginia Cooperative Extension, and I am for the soil because the soil is our soul.
Welcome to For the Soil, a conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii, joined by my co-hosts, Mary Sketch Bryant and Eric Benfelt, and we have a very special guest on the podcast this week. I have a feeling, guys, he's going to have a lot of stories about his farming operation, about his family, and about how they manage soil health on their very unique operation. Eric, would you do the honors of introducing our special guest?
Yes, Jeff, we're very pleased to have with us Bob Jones Jr. of the Chef's Garden. Bob is a second generation vegetable grower, as well as the co-owner and chief executive of the Chef's Garden. And Bob has also worked closely and was a former president of the Ohio Produce Growers and Marketers Association, and has also worked closely with Ohio State University and USDA's Agricultural Research Service. And so really pleased to have Bob. And Bob, I know context and history is really important in trying to situate where the Chef's Garden is. If you could tell us a little bit about the vision and mission and what you grow and how you grow.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you very, very much. I appreciate. I'm humbled and honored to join you folks today. We love what we do and get to do for a living, and we love to share that with folks of common ilk. So certainly, the Chef's Garden is a family farming operation. My parents started farming in 1960. And we have grown and evolved and changed the business over the years. As some of your older members or listeners might remember, the agricultural economics of the 80s kind of changed everything. My dad was a large wholesale vegetable farmer, and his vegetable operation grew to 1,200 acres in 1983. At that
That's
time,
a lot of vegetables.
that is a lot of vegetables. We were very, very busy. It was a seasonal business. His biggest customer was Kroger. I can boil this all down really. We learned some hard economic lessons. It was Economics 101. Large volume, low margin, wait for your money. Dad's biggest customer was Kroger. They were 120-day pay. Also in 1983, his last operating note was 24% interest. And so we were borrowing money at 24%, loaning it to Kroger for zero, and we wondered why it didn't work. It was simple Economics 101. We changed. Our banker, our lender, encouraged us to find a new avocation. Now, we were just too dumb to quit. Farming was all we had ever known. We loved farming. We loved agriculture. Agriculture has an amazing story to tell. It's just we're not typically very good storytellers. And so what really happened then was we went from 1,200 acres in 1983 to 6 acres in 1984. We had a roadside stand and we started going to farmers markets. We grew that. So we went from large volume, low margin, wait for your money, to a much, much smaller volume, much, much better margin, cash. Farmers markets and roadside stands did not take credit cards back in the 80s, so you didn't have a fee to pay. I sold at a farmer's market stand in downtown Cleveland across from the projects. 50% of my take was in paper food stamps every week, and it was a hellish existence. But it allowed us to continue to do the only thing we knew how to do and what we really loved to do, which was to grow and sell vegetables. Interestingly, at these farmers markets in Cleveland and other places, we met some chefs who were coming to the farmers market because they couldn't buy good fresh produce from their normal purveying chains. The product that they were getting was substandard in quality, and they couldn't get what they wanted when they wanted it. So they started coming in their own private cars to the farmers markets to buy fresh produce. As that business grew and they started asking for additional items for us to grow. Well, you grow lettuce. Would you grow tomatoes? If you're growing lettuce and now you're growing tomatoes, would you grow fresh basil? And it just kind of evolved. And quite honestly, that's what the Chef's Garden is. It is the Chef's Garden. We custom grow for culinary chefs around the country. We have grown that business now to where we ship About 99% of our product leaves the farm every day on FedEx or UPS, and we ship to restaurants in all 50 states and 17 countries. The majority of our business is actually Florida and New York. We're located in Ohio. Disney is our biggest customer. We send microgreens and edible flowers to every cruise ship that Disney operates today. That's a very profitable venture for them. They have 7 cruise lines now, and they're building 5 more. So that just happens to be, quite honestly, it's where dining is an experience. We sell to places we can't afford to go eat. We know where the back door is. We can find the delivery spot, but seldom, occasionally, when we get invited in for a wine dinner or something, where a restaurant or a chef is promoting a wine dinner to their best customers and they want to have the vintner come in and talk about wines. They may have a cheesemaker come in, they have the produce guy come in and talk about regenerative agriculture and how that impacts flavor and nutritional density. But it really has, it's been a fascinating ride for us. We don't have it all figured out by any stretch of the imagination, but we also love the ride that we're on. We love what we're learning as we go. Probably the single most important thing that we've learned over the last 40 years is how little we know. And that has been the beginning of wisdom.
Bob, I love that. How little you know. I realize that about myself every day. But so I would love to, kind of on that note, where do you see the soils piece coming in? And are you seeing that interest in the chefs, or has the soil health component been there from the start for you all? Has it evolved over time, your approach to that? Are you seeing, is regenerative ag growing in interest?
Mary, great question. And we get it often. I think how I would answer that is most chefs, most professional culinarians are absolutely interested in the results and impact of regenerative agriculture. They just don't know it. Over the past couple of years, I found myself getting very frustrated as I learned more and more about regenerative ag and learned more and more about soil health. I would say that 90% of our revenue comes from restaurant sales. 10% of our revenue comes from what I would call direct market, either on the farm stand here at the farm or in home delivery, where we now ship. After COVID, we started shipping direct to homes all over the country. Those retail customers are much more in tune about food as health. Restaurant customers have been unbelievably consistent for 40 years in their demands of us as an organization. This is what a chef wants: flavor, aesthetics, flavor, shelf life, more flavor. If you don't have flavor, you don't have anything. Okay, so then as farmers, we started looking at, okay, flavor has to come from varietals because we flat out in the world bred flavor out of tomatoes. We have very consistent size and shipping characteristics, but flavor was last and completely left off the table. That's now coming back around. So it was varietals, and then it was soil health and nutrient management. How do we feed that plant? It is multi-species cover. How do you create abundantly living organism population in and around the rhizosphere of that plant root? And that's taken us down a whole different road. All of those things are very important. Retail customers have also been consistent over the last several years. They want food that looks good, tastes good, is good for me, and it's clean. Now, there's a lot of confusion around clean. Most retail consumers assume that clean means certified organic. Now, organic purists over the last 50 years have plowed some unbelievably hard ground for the industry. They have done amazing work. I have a lot of respect for the pure organic guys, the guys that won't certify because they're just so anti-government and don't want to certify, but they're purists and they really understand it. However, most organic certifications don't test anything. They don't test soil for water infiltration rates. They don't test for microbiological life. They're not testing finished product for nutrient density. Regenerative does all of those with the exception of testing finished product. They're testing microbiological life. They're testing water infiltration rates, carbon content, organic matter content, those things that lead us along the way to healthier soil, which our our philosophy is around healthy soils, healthy plants, healthy people, healthy planet, because they're all unbelievably interconnected. Gabe Brown talks about ecosystem function. And that's really what we're about. How do we make that? Regenerative talks about healthy soils, healthy plants, healthy people, healthy communities. It adds that additional characteristic of, am I paying a living wage? Am I contributing to my local community? Am I contributing to the community from the field guys in central Mexico? How am I working with those folks? How do this really kind of goes back to being a good Boy Scout. Leave the world better than you found it. And that's regenerative agriculture. Probably the best definition of regenerative that I've ever heard is when we realize that we did not inherit the land from our grandparents, but we're borrowing it from our grandchildren. And as I get older and have grandchildren now, that becomes much more in tune for me because I want to leave them a better world than what I found.
Very well said. We're talking today with Bob Jones Jr. He is the Chief Executive Officer and co-owner of the Chef's Garden in Huron, Ohio, which is near Lake Erie. I believe it's your co-owner along with your brother Lee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left in this episode, and I'd like to invite you to stay with us for a second episode because I know Eric's got a lot of questions. I want to ask you about your dad, and I want to ask about the difference in the soil management techniques of the 1960s and 70s as they compare to today. How would you compare that?
Well, there's a world of difference, and like I mentioned earlier, we're starting to understand how little we know. The farmers of the 50s and 60s did the very best they possibly could. I believe that all farmers, with very few exceptions, are wonderful stewards of God's earth. And I think that they understand that commitment. And I think the farmers of the 50s and 60s did the very best they could with what they had to work with. My dad, who I count as one of a very small handful of people who have had a huge impact in my life. Most farming operations don't have radical change in their operation until there's a funeral. And then the next generation gets to input their ideas. My brother and I could not keep up with our dad. He had new ideas so fast, and he would send me an email, and he said, "Your cost of production on carrots is up 1/4 point this week. Why?" And I'm like, oh gosh, I got to come up with an answer. So he was really pushing us. The other part is, and I'll encapsulate this as quickly as I can. He had some real serious health issues starting in the early 90s. His cardiologist told him in 1992 that he had 5 years to live if he didn't have a heart transplant. He knew he didn't want to do that. It was a long recovery, and at that time, average life expectancy of a heart transplant patient was 5 years. So he's like, "You're telling me if I don't do this, I got 5 years. If I do this, I have 5 years, but I'm going to spend the first year of that recovering from a surgery. No thanks." He started really looking at diet, exercise, lifestyle change. That really was the beginning of him understanding nutrient density and the importance of that to human health. He changed his diet, his exercise, his lifestyle habits. He became a voracious reader. He turned off his cable TV. He put a bookshelf beside his chair at home at night, and he was a voracious reader. He passed in 2020. So in 92, he was told he had 5 years. He passed in 2020. And the last thing he did was he said, he had started his own lab. He started out with a microscope and a germination chamber and an old semi truck that he took the axles off and set it down on the ground. And before he passed, he built a full-scale lab with mass spectrometry, liquid chromatography, gas chromatography. He was looking at nutrient density, vitamins, antioxidants. He was looking at all of these things that impacted human health. And he said, "Man, I wish I had another 20 years. This is just getting fun." And he understood food as health and how it's impacted. In the 5 years since his passing, the rate of change is increasing exponentially. And we now know that through the rhizophagy cycle and getting bacteria internal to the root of a plant, we can have a probiotic effect when we consume that. We're working with physicians, we're working with oncologists, we're growing crops now for patients. And it's a really fascinating time with the information that just came out last week on the revised food pyramid.
Yeah.
It's a lot of controversy, but now eating fresh foods increasing, it's okay to eat meat again. Oh my gosh. If it's grown well, it's even better. This is a wonderfully exciting time. We're on the precipice of this. It's so exciting to be in this industry right now. We just can't wait for what's coming next. And Dad was a driver of that. He just didn't even know how important it was. Just like we're certified regenerative farm today, we farmed that way before we even knew what regenerative meant.
Well, Bob, your dad sounded like a really interesting and inspiring individual, and being able, looking at food as health and food as medicine, and you talked about in the early '60s and then 1983, and how do you find the balance between quality and quantity? Because that still seems to be a necessary balance there.
I think it's really interesting that your question ties into this whole food pyramid deal. It's wonderful news that consuming fresh fruits and vegetables, consuming healthy grains and healthy grown meat are important again. There's no way the industry is ready to provide that at scale today. We're just not there. There's a shortage of supply in organic food. The demand is outweighing supply. I think that it's important that we learn the principles and the concepts behind regenerative agriculture and how that impacts food health. Quality used to be able to gain you market share. Today, it's a hygiene factor. You must have unbelievably high quality just to play the game. It's a difference between being a price taker and a price maker. Commodity crops are price takers. You take what the market says it will give you. And we know that's upside down today in agronomic crops. It just isn't flat out not working. We are losing small family farms because of the commodity markets and input costs. If we can have a higher quality product, our goal is a consistent supply of high quality product all the time, because that's what our customers expect and demand of us. But the quality piece of it, that just keeps us in the game. That will no longer gain us market share. It just keeps us alive in the market. Being able to provide that consistently is the key. And that's difficult to do. It's hard to do, but it is not impossible. You just got to look at it differently.
Very well said. Once again, we're talking with Bob Jones Jr., Chief Executive Officer and co-owner of the Chef's Garden in Huron, Ohio. And Bob, I'd like to invite you to come back again in a couple of weeks, and we'll continue this conversation about the Chef's Garden, what your family does, and how that relates to soil health. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to do it.
And Mary and Eric, we'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
For the Soil, a conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, just call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts. All rights reserved. For the Soil, a conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.